Can the New Orleans Saints get their season back on track in New England this weekend? And just how ugly will this game be if they don't? This is the Saints Insider Podcast for Friday, October the 6th. I'm Zach Ewing with Rod Walker and Jeff Duncan. We appreciate you being here. Luke Johnson is absent today, so at some point, Dunk, you may spread out and use that whole seat there, man.
Yeah, get a little prone like I do at home.
It's empty, but a little bit different setup today, but we do have Luke's prediction. He's going to be at the game on Sunday all as well, but we're doing today's show without him. I'd like to remind you that Saints Insider is sponsored by Bank Plus. Their banking decisions are actually made here in New Orleans by local bankers who know the community and take the time to know you. From small business to big business, from home loans to bank anywhere technology, Bank Plus is here for New Orleans. Learn more at bankplus.net. I think you can actually see their building from the Dome. You can just walk over there. It's probably not open on Sunday, but you can just walk over there and check out Bank Plus. We're going to check out Saints Patriots today, kind of a deep dive on the game. And you know, we've talked about it on Wednesday. We've talked about it all week, guys. There aren't must-win games in Week 5. There just aren't in the NFL. We said must-win like 4 times for the Saints last year, and they kept having a new pulse. But, man, this team could use a victory in the worst kind of way, Rod.
Yeah, I don't think it's a must-win, but I think how they play this game is very important. If Saints go out and lose 31-28, I think people will be okay with that. But if they come out and lay an egg like they did this past Sunday and score, less than 14 points, I think people are going to be very upset.
We were, as football fans do, we were like diving into old games that we remember right before we recorded, and we were talking about Auburn 3, Mississippi State 2 in 2008, and kind of joked, like, it's not out of the realm of possibility that, I'm not predicting a 3-2 game, but like it just feels like the way both of these teams are going right now that you can't rule it out.
Well, yeah, that means it'll be a 40-38 shootout, right? Because we'll be wrong. But look, I agree with Rod, and I think, but what you mean by people, it's not just fans. I think if the Saints do not play well, there's going to be a crisis of confidence in the building, and what I mean by that is players and some coaches, I think, are going to start questioning the direction and where this team's headed, because of the recurring issues that they've had, especially on the offensive side of the ball. So I do think it's vital that they play well and that they have the focus and attention to detail that was clearly lacking last week. And you've got to have it. Say what you will about Bill Belichick, team this year. They're not a vintage Patriots team, but nevertheless, they're going to be well coached and they're going to have attention to detail. There's no question. And the Saints can't afford to go in there and have penalties and assignment errors like they've had the last few weeks.
The game is at noon on Sunday. It's on CBS, Foxborough, Massachusetts. Betting line Patriots -1. I think you can get Saints -1 in some places, actually. So it's a true toss-up game. At Caesars, it's a Patriots -1, which is where we pull this line from. There's, to your point, Jeff, there's like tension in that building a little bit. And the only thing keeping it from kind of boiling over, and I say in that building, I mean the Saints facility on Airline, the only thing keeping it from boiling over is sort of this attitude of like, hey, we're 2-2, we're okay, we know we need to get better, but we still have time to do that. We're not 0-4 or anything. But that tension's just going to keep ratcheting up until you do get a good performance.
Yeah, and I would say that I like what I hear from the players and the coaches this week of taking ownership. It feels like there is an accountability, and it's not just it's all Pete Carmichael's fault. I think everyone to a man on the team understands that they've got to play better, they've got to handle their assignments better, and yes, they do have to coach better, but it's not just that simple. Players have to play better, including Derek Carr, and I mentioned that in my column this week. He's got to play better, and I think he will. I think he'll play well. The lifetime he's only 1-3 against the Patriots, but we've seen Derek Carr play well this year, and I think that last game is almost like an anomaly in some ways. And I think he was not 100%. And everyone you talk to about this type of injury, it gets better with time. So hopefully that shoulder will be healed because he's going to need it. They're going to need to come out early, I think, in this game and score early and play well early to kind of bolster their confidence. I don't think they need to come out and slog around offensively because I think that could undermine their confidence and their enthusiasm.
Let's dive in a little bit. We'll start with Saints offense versus Patriots defense. And this is what everybody's talking about, the play calling, the lack of explosive plays, the lack of getting the ball to your playmakers in a spot where they can really hurt the defense. Bill Belichick and his D are not exactly where you want to start or who you want to face when you're having that problem.
Yeah, this is they're down two really key pieces on defense. Christian Gonzalez, the cornerback's out. Matthew Judon, who's a pass rusher's out. So those are, huge parts of what they like to do. And so the Saints are going to need to take advantage of that if they can. And, what we saw last week with this Saints offense, though, I just thought it's not going to be good enough. And if Carr's not able to take some shots down the field, I think they can have some problems. Last week everything was pretty much behind the line of scrimmage or close to the line of scrimmage. And I don't know if that was because of Carr's injury or it was just a game plan, but, to sort of help with keep the pass rush off of him. But I think they'll have to take some shots downfield. I think they need to get their running game going, which has been an ongoing thing with this team all season. We've talked about how they haven't been able to run the ball. So they have to do all of those things to be effective against a Patriots defense.
Yeah, we talk about the Saints being at a crisis point, like the Patriots are too. Sometimes you forget what the other side is going through. They just got killed by the Cowboys last week, 38-3. There was like 2 defensive touchdowns in that game. It wasn't like their defense just got ran roughshod over. But they're 1-3. They actually played the Dolphins fairly tough in a game that they lost on Sunday Night Football, I think in week 2. They played the Eagles pretty tough in week 1. They've played a tough schedule. This is not a team used to getting blown out. So to see them lose 38-3 to the Cowboys, you just know that the Patriots are in the same boat where they're saying all week, hey, we've got to circle the wagons. We've got to get back on the up and up. Here's an opportunity for us at home to set things right.
100% agree. The Saints are desperate, but I think the Patriots are even more desperate. That's the worst loss in Bill Belichick's tenure. So he's going to have their focus and attention of his team this week. I read some of the news coverage coming out of Boston. They called that a franchise-altering loss. They've called this game maybe a potentially career-defining game for Mac Jones. So
I thought you were going to say for Bill Belichick. And
for Mac Jones. But what I'm saying is there's every bit as much a sense of urgency on the other side as there is on this side. So somebody here that loses this game is going to be in full-scale crisis mode. And the Patriots historically don't lose back-to-back games very often. Now, the old Bill Belichick teams kind of skew the numbers, but I know Dennis Allen used this figure and statistic to his team in the team meeting this week that they've won 70% of the games after a loss under Bill Belichick. Now, the last 3 years, I'm sure that number's lower without Tom Brady. But the fact is, they're going to be ready to play. They're going to have the home crowd. This is a place the Saints have historically struggled. I think they've won one of their last 4 trips to Foxborough. They did win their last game.
Yeah, it was the last one.
But they historically have struggled there, as everyone has when the Tom Brady era. But this is not going to be easy in any way because of the desperation of this Patriots team.
And you call it career-defining. I think for Pete Carmichael, this game is sort of career-defining. I think the Saints offense has to play well this week because I know Dennis Allen said there won't be any coaching changes, but if this team comes out and struggles Sunday and can't find the end zone at any point, you have to do something different, I think, at that point.
Yeah, there won't be any coaching changes this week, but if it happens again, Dennis Allen's got to know that at some point it's going to be him in the crosshairs. And if he doesn't make any changes and you keep getting the same result, he's just got to, unless he wants to lose his own job.
Well, and I think if you read between the lines what Dennis Allen said this week, I think it's pretty clear. He has not come out and 100% back Pete Carmichael. He's used a lot of veiled language of like, we're going to get it right. We understand there's a sense of urgency, but he's not come out and said, because I think he knows he might have to make a change, and he's not wanting to go back on that word if he does have to make a change. And I can tell you, they're in the building, there is some questions and frustration and certainly some concern about the direction of the offense. So it's clearly something at the higher level of the organization that is a concern. And like Rod said, if it doesn't happen this week, it's going to happen soon because this is now 10 games. And even Pete Carmichael said it's not just this season. It goes back, I tweeted out today, 10 games now, not scoring more than 21 points. The next closest team in the league now that the Bears have kind of shown up is, I think, the Raiders with 5. So no one else has had this
So
stretch.
You're double everybody else in the
Right.
league in this sort of drought of futility. Okay, so Matthew Judon's out, Christian Gonzalez is out, like you mentioned, Rod. Where can the Saints attack this team? Patriots brought in J.C. Jackson, who was really struggling with the Chargers. He was like a healthy inactive a couple of weeks ago. But he did have success in New England when he was there previously, probably why Bill Belichick brought him back. But do you go straight after that guy? I mean, do you see where the new guy is lined up and try to target him downfield? Because I think one thing we'll see from Pete Carmichael, he is going to be more aggressive almost because he knows he has to be. He has no other choice.
Yeah, this is a team that didn't even throw the ball to Chris Olave, but once last week he didn't get,
He was targeted.
Yeah. I mean, he just didn't get a lot of catches.
Caught
one pass. Yeah, but and Christian Gonzalez is a guy who usually follows the top receiver. They don't have him to chase Chris Olave around, so I think Chris Olave could have a really big game this week. I think they're going to have to make sure he has a big game this week. I think that'll be key for this team.
Possible rain in the forecast, by the way, although that doesn't always, unless it's really driving rain, doesn't always stop an offense, but it could be a factor. Here's a question. What's the Saints' first play call from the line of scrimmage? I mean, it almost feels like this is one of those opportunities where they do something, maybe not crazy, but super aggressive, right? Like I kind of feel like this is the spot for that. Pete Carmichael to say, you want aggression, here's aggression, we're going to throw it deep on the first play, or we're going to run some, I don't want to say the dirty word reverse after last week, but something out of the box, out of the ordinary, if not the first play, then in that first series.
Well, I guarantee it's not going to be that fake to Derek Carr, reverse to Alvin Kamara. It's not going to be that because that did not work. And but I agree. I do think they need to establish early some type of tone for this offense and send a message. And they've done that in the past in these games, whether it's establishing the run or whether it's trying to be aggressive going deep. But I do think, I remember last week us on this podcast talking about how Dennis Allen said they need to establish the line of scrimmage. This is going to be a physical game, and they came out and didn't do any of that in that game. So you can talk all week, but at some point you got to execute, and that's really the big concern for me is seeing the it's not just the play calling. It's the offensive lines having issues. James Hurst really had a struggle last week. Carr did not play well. So it's just one thing after the other. They're down a little bit at tight end. I think Foster Moreau is going to be back this week, but they just haven't really hit on a lot of cylinders other than these receivers who I think have played well as a group.
I do think the first touch is going to be Alvin Kamara. I'm not sure how he's going to get the ball, but
that's a good bet.
Wheel route. Let's do it. Love that. But that actually, the wheel routes brings up my next point, which is the Saints, I believe, are dead last in the NFL in play action. I think they're second to last in using a man in motion. They haven't been doing that stuff. And Pete Carmichael, before the season, we saw in the one drive the first team offense played in the preseason. They used a bunch of that stuff. Where did it go?
Yeah, and it's funny you say that because I've been doing a lot of research on that. And the league is going to more motion, mainly because more coaches are being hired out of the Kyle Shanahan tree, and that's a big part of his offensive philosophy. If you notice Mike McDaniel, they were off the charts and using motion.
Next week's Houston does it a lot too.
But the Saints have never really been big into motion. Now they do personnel groupings, that's their thing, but also a lot of quarterbacks don't necessarily like that. And it could be that Derek Carr wants the static offense because it gives them a quick read on the defense. It allows them to get to the line, see what they're in. I know Breeze was like that a lot. So some quarterbacks, that's what they prefer. It's a question for Derek Carr, I think, to see because we haven't asked that yet. So in fairness, and I would say motion's not the panacea for everything, the solution, because I think the Cowboys are way down near the bottom too, and they're one of the best offenses in the league. So it doesn't necessarily equate to more motion or everybody be doing it. So there's got to be intent behind it. But I do think they could do a little more of it and certainly mix things up a little bit, make it easier for the quarterback.
Which is what Pete Carmichael said on yesterday. He was asked about the lack of using motion, and he said that, that's something they can do more of, and, we'll have to see if that actually pans out on Sunday.
Yeah, I mean, your point's well taken, Dunk, but the old saying, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Well, this is broken, so something needs to change. They need to do something different. So that's the story of the Saints. I mean, but let's flip it and say when the Patriots have the ball, it's going to be a lot of the same issues. We talked about Mac Jones has been terrible, calling for Bailey Zappi, who was released in the preseason after training camp and then signed back to the Patriots practice squad because nobody else wanted him. And that's the guy the fan bases want to play instead of Mac Jones. That's how bad it's gotten.
Yeah, it's pretty. They're averaging 13 points a game, which is, we think it's bad here in New Orleans. It's even worse up there. I think for them, Ezekiel Elliott's a guy who he's had like the second most carries on the team, but he's actually averaging 4 yards a carry, over 4 yards a carry. And I think that's what New England will try to do. I think they'll try to establish that run first and, get in some good positions, try to get ahead of the chains a little bit. And if they can do that, it keeps some of that pressure off of Mac Jones, and he may not make some of those bad decisions that he's made over the past couple of weeks.
And it's interesting because the Saints defense, one thing that they've done, even as they've struggled the last 5 quarters, they have gotten in good position to get off the field. They've had 3rds and 7s and third and 8s and things like that, and just not made the big play in that moment. So if that's the Patriots' strategy, I think you got to like that if you're the Saints, because they've been pretty good on those first and second downs of keeping teams behind the sticks.
Yeah, and I agree 100% with Rod. I think it's the only way New England can win the game is if they can run the ball, because the Saints they're going to get after Mac Jones, and we've talked about it before. He's not a mobile quarterback at all. I mean, he can move a little bit, but these are the kind of guys the Saints defense usually eats up. These kind of guys that are pocket quarterbacks that they can get after with just a 4-man rush. What's hurt them the last couple of weeks is Jordan Love, his mobility, and also Baker Mayfield with some of those Houdini escapes on converting those long third downs. I mean, I think I saw that last touchdown they scored. I think I saw it was like 8 seconds he had to throw that ball out in the right flat to Tompkins for a touchdown. I mean, that's unheard of. So, the Saints, I think if they shut the running game down, like Rod said, and they can get after Mac Jones, I don't see how they can consistently move it because they don't have the weapons to move the ball down the field consistently against the Saints defense. And the Saints got to play better, and I think they will. Marshawn Lattimore is not going to play that poorly again.
No, and they do have to play better. Moving forward, things will get more difficult on this defense. The Texans have looked good offensively the last few weeks. Trevor Lawrence is becoming an elite quarterback in Jacksonville, or at least he was. We'll see. And then after that, you've got Anthony Richardson and Justin Fields back-to-back. And we talk often about how those mobile quarterbacks are kryptonite to the Saints. So it'd really be a good time for them to have one of those get-right performances.
And look, you mentioned it earlier. I think it's important to note the Patriots have played a difficult schedule, maybe the most difficult schedule in the league. I mean, if you looked at the 5 best teams in the league, I think everybody would have the Cowboys, Eagles, and Dolphins in that top 5. So they're a little bit skewed, their numbers. I mean, they played a much more difficult schedule than what the Saints have played. So while they haven't scored as much, those are elite defenses, especially when you get behind early the way they did to Dallas and to New England. To Miami, you're playing catch up, and that's always difficult in the NFL.
All right. Keys to the game, beyond what we've talked about already, and we'll hit on special teams for a second too, but let's do keys to the game. Rod, you mentioned the rush defense. Is that where you go as your number one thing? The Saints do this well. You turn toward offense. Where are you going?
I think that's definitely a key. I think for the offense, the Saints can't turn the ball over. New England's only forced 2 turnovers all season, so they're not a team that forces turnovers. So the Saints can't beat themselves against a team like this. And to me, that's going to be a key. So Derek Carr's going to have to, take care of the ball. They can't give the ball to Adam Prentice and let him fumble with your back up. And I know I brought that up the other day too, but they got to take care of the ball because you can't give this team opportunities and let them stay in the game.
To that end, it is we second guessed that, and we first guessed it, I think, all watching. Adam Prentice is getting some of that's bad luck too. The Bears last night in the Thursday night game, their top 2 running backs were both hurt, and they had to have was it Kendall Blassing game? Their fullback became their primary running back because he was the only guy healthy, and he wasn't incredible or anything, but he certainly held on to the ball. And you think, even these guys who are the 52nd guy on your roster or 48th guy on your roster, let's say, because you have some inactives, they've got to execute. It's just bad luck from a coaching perspective too, where you go, the one time I turn to him, he can't, he doesn't get the job done.
And sometimes I think, we always look myopically at the Saints team, we don't think about, hey, that was just a good play by Antoine Winfield. We never want to give credit to the other team. And I think I'm a big believer. Antoine Winfield's a stud, and that guy made a great play. I mean, he came in right at the very last minute and punched it out. If the Saints do that, if you flip the coin and Marshawn Lattimore's one punching out, we're all talking about how great Marshawn Lattimore is, how cagey he is, how smart he is. So sometimes you have to tip your cap to the other team. And as Pete Carmichael pointed out the other day, they've run that play with the fullback a lot historically, whether it's Prentice or Michael Burton used to do it, especially in that situation. So it's not like it's unheard of what they did. But my key to the game, just getting back, in addition to what Rod said, I think they've got to get an explosive player too. They can't have this pop gun offense. You know, that's what worked. That was the formula that worked in the first 2 weeks, getting those big plays to Chris Olave, whether now you get it to Kamara, whoever it is, somebody's got to make a big play to kind of take some pressure off this offense.
You took the key right out of my mouth, so I got to give you credit for that. But I'll actually double up on it and say they've got to get more explosive plays than they give up, because that was a problem last week, and honestly against the Packers as well. Those teams were getting chunk plays, and the Saints weren't. So you'd like to see that defense button that up. Let's not give up much over 15 to 20 yards. And on the offensive side of the ball, obviously get a few of your own. And because that can be a real difference in a game between two offenses that are super struggling, is the turnovers and the chunk plays. And it sounds obvious, but in what's probably going to be a low-scoring game without that many opportunities, it just becomes that much more magnified.
And be ready for craziness on special teams. I mean, Belichick is a former special teams guy. He can wax poetically about special teams for hours. I mean, he's going to have something up his sleeve. No one's really tested yet the Saints' young battery of punter, kicker, with coming after them. And it wouldn't surprise me if they tried to come after him or throw something at the Saints on special teams to help their offense out as well, because let's face it, they're struggling just as much.
It's a great segue into special teams. So let's talk about that. Bill Belichick gave the most effusive praise to a special teamer I think I've ever heard, talking about JT Gray this week. Made him sound like he was destined for Canton.
Where'd he go to college? Yeah.
Ole Miss, I think. Did he go to Ole Miss? JT Gray?
Oh, man.
You can always count open.
I'm at the separate.
You always count an open locker room at least once a week. Rod's going to be over at JT Gray's locker
ringing the cowbell,
talking about Mississippi State.
Yeah, ringing the cow. No, but I mean, Belichick knows what the Saints do on special teams, and like Jeff said, he's the specialist at this. Again, in a low-scoring game that could be 13-10 in the fourth quarter, a special teams play could absolutely win this game.
Yeah, it's you look back to the game when Rashid Shaheed returned the punt. I mean, that was a big play in that game. So that's what New England does, and the Saints are going to have to really be tuned in on that side of, whenever special teams makes plays, because, I mean, you saw the play when New England blocked the punt against Miami a couple of weeks. I mean, that was something that Belichick had really watched, and he found that little thing that you can take advantage of, and they ended up blocking a field goal. So, that's going to be really important in this game for sure.
Yeah, that was actually an incredible play, thinking back on it. I'd forgotten about that already. But the field goal block, and especially if it does rain a little bit, and again, it's like 50%. I mean, we don't know if it's going to happen or not, but those sorts of things, a muffed punt, a muffed kick, a snap that slips through somebody's hands or something, can't have that if you're the Saints.
Yeah, look, I think everyone agrees, by all accounts, especially with the injuries to Gonzalez and Judon, that the Saints are the more talented team here. I don't think there's anybody would argue with that. But the great equalizer is Bill Belichick and his staff. And so this is a big test, in my opinion, of Dennis Allen and his staff. I mean, are they going to be up to it? Are the leaders of this team going to have the attention to detail? In preparation this week, we've heard that a lot from Derek Carr. Chris Olave talked about it yesterday. Mike Thomas talked about it. This team can't be sloppy in this game, and they can't lose focus in this game, because there's going to be some kind of trick up Bill Belichick's sleeve. He knows his team needs help, and that's what good coaches do. So, to me, Dennis Allen and his staff have to have a good game plan, and the players have to execute. And I think the Saints can win this game. I know we're going to have picks in a second, but they should win this game on talent. But games aren't always decided that way, as we've seen already this season.
You look at the last 2 weeks, I think we would have said the Saints are better on paper than Green Bay and Tampa Bay. And
yep,
here we are sitting here talking about a 2-2 team.
Yeah,
so.
yeah. And you don't win every game that you win on that you should win on paper in the NFL, but you'd like to win most of them. To your point, we call this a tipping point season. right? This feels like maybe the first inflection point of that season, if you will. I mean, Dennis Allen, like you said, you couldn't on paper have a bigger coaching mismatch. You've got a guy in Dennis Allen, and he hasn't had the best talent, and he hasn't had every opportunity, but the fact remains he has never had a winning team in the NFL against Bill Belichick, who may be the greatest coach of all time. So this is a chance not only for Dennis Allen to prove himself, but also kind of his back is squarely against the wall moment, and can he be that, not to use the cliche, but that wounded animal and kind of fight out of that and show that he does belong as a head coach in this league.
I think this is a week where he gets a chance to show that. And again, I don't think this is a must-win for the Saints. I mean, there's plenty of time for this team to get it going, but I do think if the offense struggles, I just think this team is, it's definitely heading in the wrong direction. If the offense struggles, you're going to have to, see some changes here.
And a test, I think, also of the leadership in the locker room as well. I mean, if this team comes out and gets behind early, that crowd's going crazy, and you're in that road environment, a hostile environment, that's when your leaders step up. That's when you need poise and execution. How's this team going to respond? So I think that's what I'm most interested to see is the response from this team after laying an egg last week, being disappointed with the loss at Green Bay. This is an early inflection point, like you said, and they have to play well. They can't go out there and lay another egg, or else I think not only is the streets of New Orleans going to be overrun with apoplectic fans, but inside that building there's going to be a crisis of confidence.
You've had some players this week. I know Michael Thomas spoke to the team after that loss to Tampa Bay. So I think some of the offensive guys especially are, starting to step up and, saying, hey, this isn't acceptable. Don't get used to this. Those are some of the things that Mike said to the team. So you have to see if that, spills over into the game and if you actually see some results from these meetings.
Yeah, it's certainly one of those situations where if it goes wrong early in the game, the doubts start to increase on the team, the tension increases, and then next week you're just going to hear more and more of that chatter and those questions of how are you guys going to fix it and why hasn't it been fixed yet? And so not a must-win, but certainly one that would help their situation immensely if they could get a victory. So having said that, Saints Insider Podcast is brought to you by Bank Plus, and we're into predictions mode here. Luke Johnson could not be with us, but Luke has picked a barn burner of a game. We'll give you his prediction, Saints 14, Patriots 13, which seems very realistic. It could easily be a 14-13.
Yeah, in the teens. I mean, I think that's the chalk selection. But who knows? This could be a little more high-scoring game because it could be a bunch of defensive and special team scores.
Only thing I have about 14-13 is that means the Saints get in the end zone twice and don't have to settle for any field goals, which would be different.
Last in the league in red zone offense right now.
All right, I'm going to be the bad guy here. I'm going to make my pick. I'm taking the Patriots, similar score, 16-13. And to me, it's just like I have a Missouri background, so you got to show me. If you're Dennis Allen, you got to show me that this you can fix this. If you're Pete Carmichael, you got to show me that you can be a little more inventive and creative. And frankly, if you're the Patriots, you got to show me that Bill Belichick doesn't know how to come up with a tough win when the going gets tough. So I think Bill Belichick comes up with something to flip the game. I think the Patriots maybe get a late turnover or something like that, home crowd. And it's just hard for me to pick the Saints right now. So I'm going New England 16, New Orleans 13. How about you, Rod?
The Saints are 2-2. I'm 1-3 on these predictions. So you may want to just cut this entire segment out because I've been wrong every week except the Carolina game, I guess. But I went back and forth on this game. I thought, after you left the Superdome last week, I don't think there was anything to make you say, oh, I'm gonna pick the Saints again. I'm gonna pick the Saints next week. And then you saw how bad New England played against Dallas, and you say, oh, okay, maybe the Saints will figure it out. And I think us being around the Saints every day, we sort of think, okay, this team is too talented. We see the guys in the locker room, so we think they're going to turn it around. And so, I picked the Saints to win 20-16, just thinking they'll do just enough to get it done. I think this defense can maybe carry them.
So Alvin Kamara to get the first touch on offense and a 20-16 final. Those are Rod's calls. It is a tough game to pick. Look, this is the betting line is a pick 'em or it's 1 point in either direction. It is about as even as you could possibly get, and it's an important game. So we'll see what happens. But Jeff, where are you going?
Well, this was one of the hardest games to pick we've had in recent years. It's a pick 'em basically. I picked the Saints just like Rod. I was dead set to pick against them on Monday. But being out there, maybe we're drinking the Kool-Aid again, eating the cheese. But I like what I'm hearing from the leaders of this team. I do. And I think this is a big game. We talked about the tipping point for Pete Carmichael. I think it's a big game for Derek Carr. I mean, Derek Carr's got to play well. Because I think a lot of this confidence is directed at Derek Carr. No one's going to come out and say it. I mean, they're all teammates. But he's got to play better. And so I think this is a big game for him to instill confidence in some of these leaders on the offense. And I think he will. I think he'll respond.
Yeah, and one thing we haven't mentioned yet that we should, the final injury report as we're recording this is not out yet, but we do think that the Saints will get Paulson Adebo back on defense. We think that they will get Cesar Ruiz back on the offensive line. And then Derek Carr, although he's been limited in practice, all indications are, like you said, Dunk, like this injury gets much better with time. And if he, like, I don't care what he says, I don't care what other people said, that shoulder had to be a factor either physically or mentally last week. And so with maybe lessening that effect a little bit, maybe loosens the reins on the offense, and that's certainly a point in the Saints' favor.
Yeah, so I think I went 23-21. I went over. A little unconventional
One of
wisdom
these
there.
days they're going to hit an over.
Yeah, somebody. I mean, look, they've got to end this streak just so we can have quit tweeting about it and quit writing about it. That they're 10 games. I mean, just the law of averages says at some point they're going to get a defensive touchdown to put them over the top. But when they get to the red zone, there's going to be some thoughts coming in. I guarantee you that all these guys' mind, we've got to get in. And if they struggle early, this thing could have a domino effect. So I think it's important for them offensively early on to play well. And if it's raining, we'll see how it goes because that could force them to lean on their running game, which has not been nearly effective this season.
One thing the Saints haven't done, we talk about red zone troubles. I don't think they've scored from outside the red zone yet, have they? And they only have 4 touchdowns.
They only have 4. We can count
They've had some big plays, but you could also use forget the red zone. Let's go score a 50-yard touchdown. Let's go after J.C. Jackson and go deep early in the game and try to forget the red zone. Let's just hit the end zone right away.
Yeah, like I'd like to see them throw like some kind of double reverse pass with, Taysom Hill, get crazy and try and break the ice and get some confidence going. So maybe Pete Carmichael's got it in him. I mean, we saw him try to do some stuff last week. It just was poorly executed by the offense.
All right, crisis of confidence on Airline Drive, going to a tough place to play, facing the New England Patriots and Bill Belichick. It's an inflection point for the New Orleans Saints. We will be there every step of the way. Coverage live from Foxborough this weekend, including the Saints Insider postgame show live within 30 minutes after the game. I'll be on the field there, and Luke and Jeff will both join me live from the locker room, and we'll dissect this thing. So join us then. We thank you all for being here. We're brought to you by Bank Plus. This is the Saints Insider Podcast. For Rod Walker and Jeff Duncan, I'm Zach Ewing. We'll see you next time.